Peabody here with two prime examples of horror. First, we have this book, Murders in the Rue Morgue, which completely shocked the entire world. Secondly, we have Sherman's report card, which completely shocked PS 32. Which brings us to the man we're going to visit today.
My teacher, Mr. Peabody?
No, the man who wrote the most famous horror stories of all time, Edgar Allen Poe. We set the Wayback Controls for Baltimore, Maryland in the year 1832.
I did get an A in hockey, Mr. Peabody.
That's hooky and step inside. The Wayback, which I invented one morning while waiting for a bus, responded magnificently. And there we were in Poe's study.
And with that, the steel door closed shut, never to open again.
Ooh, our timing is perfect. I bet he just finished The Fall of the House of Usher.
Peeking over his shoulder, we were thoroughly stunned by the title of the book.
Winnie the Pooh?
Yes, and tomorrow I shall write Little Women.
But you can't do that, Mr. Poe. You're supposed to write horror stories.
I've tried, but they all come out with happy endings.
Perhaps if you were put into an environment of horror...
That gives me a keen idea, Mr. Peabody. Let's take Mr. Poe to a haunted house.
I was all for staying where we were, but it being Sherman's birthday, I decided to humor him. In those days, Baltimore was simply rampant with haunted houses. Reaching the outskirts of town, we turned onto the old mill road, leading past the cemetery, and approached Grizzly Manor.
The only thing we need now is a good old spooky storm.
It seemed that someone else was humoring Sherman on his birthday. Three things went up and down: Sherman's Adam's apple, the hair on the back of my back, and Poe's yo-yo. It doesn't seem as though your scheme is working too well, Sherman.
Yeah, but wait till he gets inside. Come on.
With Sherman leading the way, we entered the foreboding abode and fell victim to a cleverly concealed trapdoor in the floor. In the dim light, we saw that we were now in a chamber of horrors.
Mr. Peabody, do you see what I see?
Implements of torture, Sherman. An iron lady, the rack, a spiked boot, and a television set, the most fiendish means of torture known to man. This was enough to frighten anyone out of his wits. That is, anyone but Edgar Allan Poe, who had now taken the string from his yo-yo and was happily playing cat's cradle.
Gosh, won't anything scare him?
We would soon know, for it was then that a panel in the wall slid open and it walked into the room. Battle axe in hand, the loathsome creature prepared to deal Poe a devastating blow. And that was when the second cleverly concealed trapdoor opened, and we plunged down to a pool of evil-smelling, brackish water. You all right, my boy?
I think so, Mr. Peabody. Ooh, some haunted house, huh?
Well, it would scare the dickens out of Dickens, I'll say that.
But not Edgar Allan Poe.
Not Edgar Allan Poe. In fact, there he was, floating next to us inside an old inner tube, having the time of his life.
Gosh, nothing scares him.
Something might. Look.
Him.
And they don't belong to a Cadillac. Grabbing Sherman with one paw and Poe with the other, I headed for the bottom of the pool. If that shark got in here, there must be a way of getting out. Sure enough, there was a drainage pipe just large enough for all three of us to get through. We swam through the pipe for what seemed like hours until finally we came to a point where the water emptied into Chesapeake Bay. Seconds later, we were sunning ourselves on the beach.
Some experience, huh, Mr. Poe?
Poe was busy constructing castles of sand.
I give up, Mr. Peabody. I guess Mr. Poe will never be frightened enough to write horror stories.
Oh, yes, he will. Edgar, what time does the postman arrive at your house?
12 noon exactly.
Then we just have time. We caught the first ferry boat going west, transferred to a horse and buggy going north, took a streetcar going east, and there we were in the southern part of Baltimore, right in front of Poe's house.
12 on the nose, Mr. Peabody.
And here comes the mailman. Under my instructions, Poe took the letter he was given and opened it right on the spot.
Mr. Peabody, he's scared stiff.
Naturally. You see, today is April 15th. That letter contained his income tax report, enough to frighten the wits out of anyone.
Who's that gentleman giving Mr. Poe smelling salts?
Well, that's his brother Richard, a noted writer in his own right.
What did he write?
An almanac. Richard Poe's almanac.
Don't you mean Poe Richard's almanac?
Come to think of it, I guess I do.